Hier ist Ingo von Attac Köln. Hallo Köln, hallo Deutschland, hallo Europa, hallo Europe, hello World. Zunächst auf Deutsch. Also wir von Attac Köln sind sehr stolz drauf und freuen uns sehr, heute Abend ein Konzert mit dem wunderbaren und außergewöhnlichen David Rovics zu übertragen. Eigentlich hätten wir gerne das Konzert hier in Köln organisiert, übrigens an diesem heutigen 1. Mai, aber da kam dann irgendwas dazwischen. Aber wir sind froh, dass wir das auf diesem Weg machen können. Hello World, now in English. I just represent, my name is Ingo, I'm a representative of the local group of Attac in Cologne, Germany. And we proudly present you, and very happy to do so, an online gig with the extraordinary songwriter David Rovics. And just to mention that, exactly on the same day today, we actually planned to do a concert with you, David, today because it's the 1st of May, and then something came in between, so we couldn't do that. So we more happy anyway, so we can present this concert to the world. And now I'm stopped talking. I just get myself a coach and clapping my hands, singing and shouting and everything you should do at the concert. Say, have a great concert, everyone, and you, David. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ingo. Wonderful intro. I love it. Okay. We got a frog in the audience. Excellent. We have at least a dragon and a tiger over here somewhere. Good. I will begin now.
Okay.
And I'll switch this headphones so I can hear myself on this microphone. And then it'll sound better. And we are broadcasting on the Facebook page of Attac in Cologne, Germany. And incidentally, just in case there's anybody who doesn't know what Attac is, it is the Association for the Taxation of Financial Transactions and for Citizens Action. And it's a French organization originally, which is why Attac, it does not mean attack exactly in either German or English, but that's what it is, a wonderful organization that has done a lot of organizing across Europe, Quebec, and elsewhere around taxing the rich and stocks and all sorts of good organizing big, wonderful protests all over the country against the TTIP in 2016 and a lot of other things. I can see comments if anybody has any comments or questions, and especially if they're coming from Attac's website. If the comments look like they have a German accent, then I'll be more interested in them. Not that I know what a comment with a German accent looks like, but... There's foreboding in the air, waiting for an earthquake. Pandemic spreading, no telling how it might remake a world so divided in so many ways. Anyone can see it's no way to greet such days when you can shut your borders, but it'll barely slow the spread with 1 million people homeless and not enough hospital beds. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. The foreboding in the air can get only thicker as we see our leaders passing blame and getting sicker. A crashing economy, leaders fraught with indecision, only capable of thinking like bought-off politicians. Not enough testing kits, and the ones you got were broken. But hey, the president has spoken. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. 1 million people wake up In the morning, thinking thoughts they never had, till they found that they were sinking on a cruise ship full of holes, where if you can't catch the breeze, there are no fences tall enough to keep out the disease. Lifting every boat or watching them all sink, ready or not, we're standing on the brink. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. Contain an epidemic like in Wuhan or in Seoul, or watch a catastrophe take its toll. Hide behind our gates, cowering afraid, or organize our neighbors in mutual aid. In synchronicity, such great things can be done. A planet to lose, or a world to be won. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. I just realized you can't see my guitar, so I'm going to just back up here. Bring the mic back here a little bit. And very professional studio setup here. Okay, that'll be somewhat of an improvement. Yes. Okay. That's nice to see these comments. It's sort of like the silent version of applause, and but now I can't see the set list that I came up with of some kind. Yeah. So there's right now, May 1st is the first day for many, many people in the United States who are going on rent strike, because I believe it's something like 1 out of 4 workers are unemployed in real numbers, and so, you know, people can't pay the rent, and so they're not paying the rent, and a lot of people who can pay the rent are not paying the rent out of solidarity, which is the way these things work. And if it keeps up for long enough, and people defend each other from evictions that will be coming, and they do that in large enough numbers and consistently enough, then rent strikes can win, and they have. And there's a lot of history of that. Rent strikes can win. You can stay on rent strike for years, not pay rent for years, keep your place, and at the end of it, you win a settlement where you pay much, much less rent, or where, you know, all kinds of other things can happen. Laws can be passed that can change laws about how renting works in the first place. You know, these things happen. They have happened. There are lots of reasons why the rent is comparatively far less in most European countries than it is in the United States, even though the living standard is significantly higher. There are reasons for this, and it has to do with the labor movement and a lot of other things. And on May Day, this is International Workers' Day, by the way. This is a song I wrote for all the rent strikers. It's specific, I guess, to the states in the United States where there's been a suspension on evictions, which is many states, including the one I live in. So in case anybody out there is confused by the first and last line of the song, it only applies to certain states in the U.S. at the moment, and it certainly applies also to a lot of European countries, which have actually suspended rents and mortgages for the duration of the crisis, or some version of that kind of, or maybe they're just talking about it and not actually doing it. This is the thing. You've got to watch out for the news, you know. I thought things were better until I just talked to Ingo a few minutes ago, and then he was like, okay, no, maybe not everything's quite so peachy over there, but it's just, this is the epicenter of the disaster. I think of that, there's little question for the moment. The failed states of America. There's a suspension on evictions. Stick to your convictions. Don't pay the rent. If at home we have to stay, then most of us can't pay, so don't pay the rent. Tell your landlord, sir, that mortgage can defer. Don't pay the rent. They start rattling their sabers, say I need to feed my neighbors, yeah. Don't pay the rent. It's time now to demand one big union grand. Don't pay the rent. Neoliberalism is dead. It's time to raise your head. Don't pay the rent. Strike for the guarantee, a home for everybody. Don't pay the rent. Running water, housing, healthcare all across this earth we share. Don't pay the rent. Capitalism has failed. Put the billionaires in jail and don't pay the rent. We need a new world now. Let me tell you how. Don't pay the rent. With mutual aid, a new world can be made. Don't pay the rent. From the ashes of the old, if we stop doing what we're told, and don't pay the rent. Solidarity with society. Don't pay the rent. Our lives matter a lot. The landlord's profits do not. Don't pay the rent. We can redefine what's theirs and ours and mine. Don't pay the rent. There's a suspension on evictions. Stick to your convictions. Don't pay the rent. A little anti-capitalist bluegrass. And this is my notebook where I keep my notes, and I write with a pen in this notebook, just so you know. Okay. Yeah. We're going to do another song about a strike, except this isn't a rent strike. This is a strike that's been going on in California now for months. It predates the pandemic, and a lot of things predate the pandemic. This country and a lot of other countries, but we're talking about this one at the moment. I am talking about this one that I'm in, the U.S. at the moment. It's a complete disaster, and it was a complete disaster before the pandemic hit. It was a horrible public health disaster before the pandemic hit. We had millions of people living on the streets of this country. And we still do. And that situation is true for, believe it or not, graduate students in California, and a lot of other people in California, and a lot of other people in other states. But in California, it's especially horrendous, and the student teachers have been on strike. And now their campuses are all locked down, so it's a different situation. The difference between a strike and a lockout. California is a precarious place. One moment you might be standing, the next you're on your face. You can have an earthquake, be knocked down on the ground. You can have your whole house come down. But far more precarious than a San Andreas fault, far more deadly than a sinkhole in the asphalt, is the housing crisis in winter rain or summer heat. TAs living in their cars, sleeping in the backseat. But the strike is spreading, and with the margins this thin, it's gonna keep on spreading till we win. California is a precarious place. If salaries rise, it's never apace with the cost of living, which goes up all the time, as big landlords make trillions from this corporate crime. But however it happened, this is where we are, eating from food banks, living in cars. Not much further we can sink, so we stand here looking over the brink. But the strike is spreading, and given where we've been, it's gonna keep on spreading till we win. California is a precarious place, especially when the riot cops with billy clubs and mace are sent in by Napolitano to go and crack some heads, attacking students and their teachers in horror as they fled across the campus. No safe place. More and more resembling a military base where a tenured professor is just a socialistic dream in a place that inequality has ruptured at the seam. But the strike is spreading, we cannot take it on the chin. It's gonna keep on spreading till we win. It's gonna keep on spreading till we win. And it's the situation now, as you're all hearing about all over the world. I listen to a lot of different news sources, so I realize that in much of the world's English language press, the United States is being talked about a lot as a failed state, quite appropriately. And a country with tremendous inequalities and divisions, and a country where, what is it? I think in Oregon, which is one of the whitest states in the country, in Portland, I believe 40% of the victims of COVID-19 have been people of color, and that kind of statistic is typical all over this country. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and one of the reasons is because a vastly disproportionate number of the people doing what they call essential work are people of color, and then there's a lot of other reasons, like overcrowded housing conditions and the legacy of fast food and food deserts and a lot of other things. But one of the people who have died over the past few weeks of COVID-19, one of the many bus drivers who have died of COVID-19 over the past few weeks, is one from Detroit named Jason Hargrove. A pandemic is spreading. The health system's collapsing. You can watch it all unfolding on the screen. If you're afraid to go outside, enough groceries to hide, it may have been weeks since you have seen someone you can touch, and you miss it so much as you wonder what might happen next. Like when your savings run out and the choice is all about what kind of help you might be able to expect. Or perhaps when COVID arrived, while some struggled to survive, you were what they call essential. It didn't take long to see you got that wrong. The word they really meant was expendable. It didn't take long to see there was no emergency. Plans in place for something which all the scientists knew was just a matter of when there'd be a pandemic again. And the kleptocrats in power didn't have a clue. Otherwise, why did Jason Hargrove die? Because he kept keeping on, waking before dawn to do his part for society. Jason drove his bus, he didn't even make a fuss at the time of the impropriety. Somebody coughed, the virus was off. Not 2 weeks later, Jason would be dead. What if he had protective gear, with sick passengers so near, with no barrier to protect his head? Why did Jason Hargrove die? Stay home, flatten the curve, they say, unless we need you to serve food for us or care for all the ill. In that case, we'll call you a hero, like the workers at Ground Zero, where one by one the cemetery filled. Now in every bus and truck, the drivers try their luck, essentially told, thank you for your service. If these were the front lines, no one put up any signs. Did anybody sign up for this? Why Did Jason Hargrove die? Once the death rate peaks in days or months or weeks with each one of the virus's waves. Once we can take stock and recover from the shock of the sight of all of the mass graves. Will this be the impetus, this driver on a bus, along with so many, many more? The nurses and the prisoners, seafarers and farm workers, what will they all die for? Why? Did Jason Hargrove die? Why? Did Jason Hargrove die? And I just threw my pick, which if I were on stage would be a bigger problem. Let's see here. I'm gonna get. Let's see. First pick. And I saw there was a question about how many people might be viewing, and that's always I have no idea what that number up on the screen means, because it's like it tells me how many people seem to be watching now, but I'm not sure which platforms that includes and how that number is figured out. It's a mystery to me, but we find out after it's over, basically. Then we can see. Unless somebody has more technical skills than I do to figure out what that number actually means. Yeah. So this is I'm very happy doing concerts on the internet, but it is the weirdest thing to do a concert when there's no noise after you play. You know, it's like the automatic thing is like you're supposed to have this applause, and then you can you have a few seconds at least to think about what you're going to do next, and then literally to look at your notes. And then if you have to do it without anybody applauding, it's like, you're kind of naked basically. But speaking of naked, the French dentists all took their clothes off in protest against lacking personal protective equipment. And I believe dentists in Germany did that too, according to the article I read. I don't know, it seemed to be a French initiative, but it's a sort of initiative that Germans would readily go along with. From my knowledge of, you just have to walk along the Rhine if you want to see what I'm talking about. The Germans take their clothes off quite readily. And it's good because you won't get a sunburn too often. So there's a lot of songs and things from the past. I mean, there may be a lot of the word unprecedented is frequently used to describe the current situation. But there's always lots of precedent, and for all sorts of things in all kinds of ways. And one of the precedents to the kinds of corporate bailouts that are currently going on in the U.S., along with the bailing out some elements of the working class, in order to preserve capitalism, to prevent people from dying and starving and stuff like that, which usually is bad for capitalism because it results in hungry mobs burning things down like cities. But there's lots of corporate bailouts going on right now, along with the keeping people alive, which is also happening to some extent here. Yeah, I've been following a lot of world news, but I must admit that I'm more on top of what's going on in the U.S. because it's so much to keep track of that as a news junkie, I'm going around. I don't know about the rest of you out there, but I'm going around basically with headphones in my ears, listening to world news almost every waking hour. And I know that drives a lot of people nuts, but it kind of drives me nuts too. But I feel like it's my job, and but it's even then it's still too much to keep track of. But yeah, the bailout, got a new $1 trillion bailout coming up on top of the $2.2 trillion one, and There were other bailouts in the past, and I wrote this song back in 2011. And when we were talking about staying right here during Occupy, it was staying right here in occupied centers and cities and encampments in the shadow of towering skyscrapers owned by banks, like this building I'm in right now is owned by, which we're on rent strike, by the way. And but this is a song about staying right here in another context, which makes just as much sense in the current context, actually, this chorus, I realized. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll know in a minute, because I'm talking about a song I haven't sung yet. So just in case you're thinking, gosh, I understand English, but what the hell is he talking about? It's not you, it's me, okay? Cause this is where they buy the politicians. Cause this is where power has its seat. Because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on this street. Cause all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%. Cause these greedy banksters rob the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. We're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Cause both my parents lost their savings. Cause I have never opened an account. Because the interest on my credit card just doubled. And now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral. With our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live. But I can't afford to drive a car. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Cause it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who would smash it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square. We're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Cause corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because corporate rule isn't working, and it's time for the humans' hearts and minds. We're gonna stay right here. 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 That was a song I wrote during Occupy Wall Street. And just checking here. And oh my goodness, we've had a request for a song that I haven't practiced in years, so I'm gonna have to forego that. Although it would be a good idea. The bicycle song. It's just been used in a music video on the web, and people are riding a lot of bicycles these days, and we're turning hundreds of miles of streets into pedestrian lanes, pedestrian streets in this country for the first time ever that I don't know of, and I hope they all stay pedestrian. We'll see. But this concert is being sponsored by Attack in Cologne, and while many of these songs are directly relevant to the work that Attack does, This song is especially about Cologne and about one particular artist in Cologne who started up a project quite a while ago. Whoops! And if you travel around Germany, you'll see. If you're German, you'll know what I'm talking about, and if you're not, the next time you go to Germany, in any city other than Munich, look down on the sidewalk, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. I first showed up in Deutschland, camping on the Rhine. The first town I went to was also the first sign of the kind of self-reflection that had gone on around here. Indications everywhere, so shiny and so clear. Look down on the sidewalk, where a little light is shown. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. What did this place once look like? Who lived on this block? It can't be recreated, but you can partially take stock. Look down on the sidewalk for a little bronze square. Read the words engraved upon it that says who was living there before they were taken away to the dark unknown. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Little squares all over, you'll find them all around. Not much information on them, and they don't make a sound. But if your imagination is anything like mine, then all you need to trigger it is one lone Stolperstein. Take a moment to remember as you look down from your phone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. There are 6 little squares here, one for each member of one family that was taken one morning in December. The youngest child was 2, the eldest one was 10. Within a year each one of them had died at Sachsenhausen, their bodies burnt to ashes, flesh and blood and bone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. And every time I see them, I wish I would see more, embedded on the sidewalks on so many other shores. Just one stone to remember each one who met their fate at all the slave plantations in all the torture states. But for some it's safer just to leave the dead alone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. Stumble upon a stumbling stone. And last time the banks were bailed out, they were bailed out by a lot of different countries, and a lot of different countries bailed out their banks, and they had all kinds of different reasons for doing that. It wasn't all just about, bailing out the banks. In some countries, it was also about looking after the economy for other people, other than the bankers. Not here in the U.S., though. And one of my favorite headlines prior to the pandemic that I would see now and then. It was a pretty bleak period prior to the pandemic, as you'll recall, in many, many parts of the world, including here. It was, of course, we have, fascists in power in the U.S., Brazil, and India, and other countries. And then you have, I guess we have a German audience, so I shouldn't say fascists. I should proto-fascists. They're on their way. It's 1933. It's not 1940. Or maybe it's 32, depending on how you measure it and depending on what country. But it's we got these proto-fascists, and we got poverty increasing drastically, and you got the climate being destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. But every once in a while, you'd see a nice headline, and it would be like something along the lines of banker begins serving prison sentence. And then when you look at the next line after that, it's invariably the byline is Reykjavik, Iceland. And this is a song I wrote for the Icelandic banker jailers. I think Iceland, last I checked, I mean, I don't know if they've freed them all due to COVID-19, as they probably should, but Iceland has put 40 of their bankers in prison. And this is a country, as I mentioned in the song, that has somewhere around 500,000 people. Although that can be a sensitive question when you're talking. I mean, I'm sure they know specifically. I once made the mistake of saying that there were 4 million people in Denmark, and immediately somebody said, there's 5. Don't forget 20% of our population. Iceland is an island with 500,000 or so Vikings, mostly known for volcanoes, hot springs, and fishing, known for its welfare state for being good and socialistic. Certainly not known for being corrupt or nepotistic, but in the USA and Europe, when they were deregulating banks, Iceland's politicians took bribes and joined their ranks. Soon you had a situation one would think just couldn't be. A bank whose debt was worth 10 times the country's GDP. When Wall Street imploded, sure enough it spread. Banks all over the world were floating in the red. All over the world, governments made the plan to cut spending and raise taxes on the working woman and working man. The banks were bailed out while the people had to pay. But in Iceland, people thought there must be a better way. And the earth stood still a moment. Fear was struck in every top when Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. It's a sing-along. I know you're stuck in your houses and stuff, but you could sing. Open the windows. Sing loudly. Folks were in the streets in Reykjavik and just couldn't be ignored. They said this is a debt we Icelanders can't afford. Let's guarantee deposits of all our people, yes indeed. But as for all the speculators motivated by their greed to make really dumb investments, to them Iceland said good luck. Sorry for your losses, but we don't really give a fuck. The 1% all trembled when they took away the trough. When Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. The UK called them terrorists, said we cannot let this stand. Who did these peacenik blondes think they are in Iceland? They threatened isolation and economy in flames, but the Icelanders said, sorry, but the banks can settle their own claims, though that might be harder for them now that they're under house arrest, or else they fled the country as they were most unwelcome guests. And now Reykjavik's recovery just makes the fat cats cough, since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. If you haven't heard of this example, perhaps there's a reason why the owners of the world don't want this kind of shit to fly. They say we all must pay up in this shakedown by the mob if we can't afford to pay the rent because we don't have a job. They say it's not their problem if we're forever shackled by their debt. We must save the 1% from the fate they should have met. But there is an alternative, though it makes the fat cats scoff, since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. Since Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers, Iceland told the bankers to fuck off. Just gonna look at this comment here. What is that? All right, and we're getting a couple of hellos from all over the world there. People are, that's the wonderful thing about the internet. I always say, I never get tired of saying that. You might get tired of hearing it, but I love that about the internet, that for all its faults, it is global. I was talking with a wonderful guy named Ajamu Umi. I'm doing an interview show Tuesday through Friday, an hour-long show where I'm interviewing different people. Ajamu was talking about how one of the kind of slight pros of the many cons in this situation is the internet, and he's an organizer within the Pan-Africanist movement, and you can talk to the entire African diaspora as long as people have Wi-Fi, so online. Don't need to fly to Tanzania. Let's see. Not that you shouldn't fly to Tanzania, but at the moment it's probably not a good idea. Yeah. I'm going to do a little more about just how bad things were pre-pandemic, because it's a very important concept to understand that the reason why things are going so much worse in some countries than they are in others is because those countries where things are going so badly in are countries with profound problems with inequality and kleptocracy. And if you want to hear more about the situation with how desperate the situation is with the homeless in the United States right now, you can check out my interview last week with Keith McHenry, founder of Food Not Bombs, upon which page this is also broadcasting. This is the first track from my album that I recorded last fall in Ireland, about Los Angeles. It's 2019, and looking around at the tents and trash and excrement scattered on the ground. So many mansions overlooking the sea. Stretch limos, Rolls Royces, and movie stars all over Los Angeles County. It's 2019. And one thing I know is most people wish we could rewind to a couple of decades ago. Before the rents tripled, folk began to move out into their cars, into their tents, where drivers look on however loudly you shout. It's 2019. But in a black and white photo, it could be 1929. Wherever you go, in every single neighborhood, hungry people wonder why. Some make billions on a blockbuster, while so many are left out to die. It's 2019, where every 8 hours someone is found cold on the sidewalk beneath the glass and steel towers in the wealthiest nation in all of human history. So far from paradise, so close to Walt Disney. It's 2019. There's no Dust Bowl, just real estate speculators and all the lives they stole. I don't know what to think when I hear the reporters say 1,000 people died last year living on the streets of LA. It's 2019. In a very twisted development, in some places they're putting up the houseless population, the homeless population, those living on the streets. They're putting people up in hotel rooms, and people living in shelters are being put up in hotel rooms in some places in the world. But here in the United States, that's too much of a dangerous precedent to set, housing the homeless in some form like a hotel room. So what they're doing in the supposedly very progressive city of Santa Cruz, just to take one example of many, they are putting people in metal pens in parking lots, complete with what they call hygiene stations. That's just a place where you can wash your hands with soap. And this is their solution. And which is completely outrageous in the first place, because, of course, Santa Cruz is a tourist town, if you don't know, and it has loads of hotels, including lots of fancy ones. They're all empty, but they're not putting anybody in them. And And then just a couple days ago, a city truck servicing the so-called hygiene station, actually ran over a homeless person who was sleeping on the grass in the hygiene station by accident, apparently. I'm gonna there's a lot of people in prison right now who have COVID-19. It's spreading, extremely fast throughout the prisons in the United States and other countries, although more civilized countries like Iran have freed tens of thousands of prisoners. Iran also jails a lot of their people, but not as many, not nearly as high a percentage as the United States, which is the biggest jailer of its population in the world. In case you didn't know, that is a fact. However, here's a song about a prisoner in a British prison whose fiancée and children are waiting for him in London, hoping that he might get let out before he dies of COVID-19. He's a prisoner with serious health problems. Behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the horrors committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, in solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero to whistleblowers everywhere, who help them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man. The reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, whose suns set long before, were torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused to say precisely which, or to try to clear the mist, or to explain how he's not the same as the other journalists. Behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured as we stand here now for revealing the war crimes. Why, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is a teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown, a 24-hour-a-day indefinite lockdown behind these prison walls. Free Julian Assange, indeed, exactly. And I'll do a song about another prisoner. I actually could do a lot of songs about a lot of prisoners, but not to brag. But I've written a lot of songs about prisoners. But we'll do this one in tune, unlike the last one. This is live. If we weren't live, I'd be in tune. That's how you know it's live. There's a man in prison in Texas who's been there for 21 years as of this year, and this year or next year in 2021, he's theoretically up for parole if he survives that long. He's now, I believe, 70 or 71. He's a beautiful, beautiful human being. Alvaro Luna Hernandez started life with a shorted hand, growing up in Texas on occupied land. His troubles with the law and with the sheriff of Alpine resulted from a racist gang crossing every line of respect for human decency. Vicious thugs in blue who've ruled the hills of Texas since long before 52. In the middle of the 20th, when Alvaro was born, it wasn't long before the first time that he was torn from the streets of Alpine to a windowless cell, when the cops kicked in his head till no one could tell if he'd live or die, and somehow he was breathing still when the morning sun was shining in the Texas hills. Alvaro Luna Hernandez grew up to lead the fight against police corruption and for human rights. Falsely accused of murder, incessantly harassed, a young life in constant danger, quickly flying past. So on the day a cop came to his house, pointed his gun, Alvaro knocked it out of the officer's hands, and he did run. Alvaro Luna Hernandez hid out underground. After the biggest manhunt in West Texas, they fired many rounds. He managed to surrender without being shot, and that was the last breath out of prison that he ever got. The trial was a sham, and he was given 50 years, sentenced by the machine to be ground up in the gears. Since 1996, a quarter century ago, in solitary confinement, they've kept Alvaro. He's now lived to be an old man, and whether he ever leaves, Justice in the USA exists only for the thieves who came and stole this country, declared it to be theirs. Slave masters in power, Chicanos in the crosshairs. Alvaro Luna Hernandez started life with a shorted hand, growing up in Texas on occupied land. We have somebody watching from Romania. Wonderful. Solidarity from Romania. Excellent. I think that might be the first time I've seen anybody mention they were watching from Romania. So I'm glad, especially glad about that. And let's do this song. There's, of course, right now here in the U.S., we are, the another place where the pandemic is spreading rapidly is in the slaughterhouses, meatpacking factories, and the farms where people work. It's not so much, as I understand it, from a viral, my understanding of the way the virus acts as they're learning new things about every day. It seems to be the case that it's not necessarily working relatively close together in the fields that is making people sick. It's the housing conditions and the conditions in which people get to and from the field. So crowded buses and very crowded living situations. So if they really wanted to call the farm workers essential workers, then they should put them all up in 5-star hotels and quadruple their pay. My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of the conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. So in the midst of these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin Gobra, right with the harp and the shamrock and Libertad para Republica. Just 50 years after Wolftone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may, but from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. In 5 major battles, Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. I think this is the first concert on the web I ever did where I had the most listeners after an hour, which is a very good sign. I don't know if that has something to do with the attention span of Germans or what the explanation for that is, but I like it. And I'm not done. I'm actually only about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through this set list. And no, more than that. But anyway, I'm going to keep on going here because I have a plan here of the things I thought would be especially relevant to talk about. I prepare for these shows. I spent hours actually coming up with a set list this morning and practicing so that I would remember what key I'm doing it in and all that kind of stuff. And the set list was twice as long. I whittled it down. And that's how it goes with these things. So, once again, as much as people talk about unprecedented, somebody's asking, what platforms? People are watching. I don't know where the most people are watching, but people are watching on the website of Attack in Cologne, Germany, and they're watching on Twitch, which is, I believe, the people watching in Cologne on the Attack website are watching this on Twitch. And then there's also, it's also being broadcast on Food Not Bomb's global Facebook page and on the Popular Resistance Facebook page and the Song News Network's Facebook page, and then on all of my own personal media, like, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, VK. What was I going to do? My toddler, my 4-year-old, has a chronic cough, and I think it's related to pollen because his mother is allergic to pollen. And I seem to be developing a pollen allergy. Or maybe it's that I'm talking too much on the web all the time. But anyway, it's, you never, when you have a toddler who's constantly coughing in public, it's an interesting experience in this particular moment in time. Most people understand and some people look horrified. Luckily, it's a low population density, so people can just cross the street if they're too horrified, which they often do. Which is what most people are doing these days. But it's a very strange thing crossing the street to avoid somebody when you don't want them to think that you're actually doing, like that you don't like them. I'm used to crossing the street to give people space, like so, late at night, so some solo woman doesn't feel threatened or something, but this is a whole different situation. But there's some precedent, and here's some precedent. There was a pandemic 102 years ago. It killed more people than the First World War. Just to put it in context, too, in terms of like the number of people who died. I mean, you can take lots of examples in lots of different countries, but just to, to get, people have been talking a lot here about how now we're up to over 61,000 deaths from that are confirmed to be from COVID-19, which probably means possibly twice as many, according to what most of them are saying. But it's and so this number is relevant to the broadcasters because they're often mentioning that this is more people than Americans who died in the Vietnam War, although it's terribly common that they say people instead of Americans, which is actually not at all true. Millions of people died in the Vietnam War, and the overwhelming majority were Vietnamese killed by American bombers. And most of the Americans who died, I pause for dramatic effect in case you didn't know this, most of the Americans who died in Vietnam fell out of combat aircraft. Did you know that? I'm looking at the screen. I just want to make sure all the Americans out there are aware of this fact. Did you know that most of the Americans who died in Vietnam fell out of combat aircraft? That's how they died. Most of them, not all. I didn't say all. You can tell me about your uncle who, had a whole different situation, but he was not the norm. 10,000 combat aircraft were shot down over Vietnam, just to give an understanding of what that was like, what that war was like. Anyway, more Americans have now died than fell out of combat aircraft in Vietnam. Another relevant statistic is in 1918, in the pandemic of 1918, more people died of that pandemic in Japan than died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, within just the space of a few weeks. World War was raging like the earth had never seen. A whole generation lined up in trenches with killing machines. But aside from a few islands and some mountain peaks, the pandemic killed more people in just 24 weeks. No one knows where it began. Speculation's gone on for years. The trenches of Europe is where the deadly strain appears. From packed trains and hospitals around the globe it spread, this war strain of the virus that left so many dead. The death toll was unequal, but barely anywhere was left untouched, though the greatest share of dying was reserved for the poorest colonies of the empires and their wars that created this disease. If you have a couple of hours, then do something with me. Conduct a little research into your family tree. If you look into it, it won't take long. Quite likely you will find in 1918 you left an ancestor behind. Pandemic knew no borders. It went from the front lines, which had increased its deadliness as if by design. It circled the whole planet. So many people died. They dug mass graves everywhere. Put your relatives inside. A world war was raging like the earth had never seen. A whole generation lined up in trenches with killing machines. But aside from a few islands and some mountain peaks, the pandemic killed more people in just 24 weeks. I just remembered that there's people who might have been tuning in just to hear me sing the Internationale 5 minutes before the hour. That's why there's all these people. I'm going to get to that song, just in case you're wondering, like, where? I thought he was going to sing that song. I am. I will. But not when you thought I would. Sorry. I didn't time this. I just made the set list without timing it. But we're not on TV, so it doesn't matter. There's no show coming after this one. But this song bears a little more introduction than usual. I mean, I usually just say this is about my friend Katarina Jakob's grandmother, Katarina Jakob. But 75 years ago today, the Soviet Red Army was moving across Europe from the east, heading west at the cost of tremendous, tremendous loss of human life, particularly Russian life. And they got to Berlin and liberated Berlin from fascism by a little over a week from now, 75 years ago. And but today, on May 1st, 1945, the Red Army had made its way to, not sure exactly what the nearest town will be, so somewhere in the countryside east of Berlin. And it was on that day, the night before, basically, there had been Allied bombing raids, and the SS officers who were escorting the death marchers from Ravensbrück to Berlin left the scene. And the women, it was a women's prison, women's concentration camp for women from all over Europe, primarily. Mostly communists, I believe. And there were hundreds of women on a march from Ravensbrück to Berlin, and after the SS left in the morning, the bombing raids had ended, and the women were alive, and they came out from the trenches that they were hiding in and discovered the SS was gone, and they were surrounded by Russians. And they all started spontaneously singing the Internationale. Katharina Jakob, long before she took that name, was organizing workers in Hamburg just the same. Organizing beneath the flag of deepest red, a new dawn of peace and freedom clearly shining in her head. Katharina Jakob first was sent to jail when the trappings of democracy all began to fail. She was frequently arrested, in and out of custody, while her first husband was in hiding from the Nazis. Katharina Jakob was acquitted of a crime, but the Gestapo had the last word. They weren't finished with her this time. She was sent to Ravensbrück, a killing hunger at her side. She heard of the execution, how her second husband died. For Katharina Jakob, the end was close at hand. She was on a death march with a ragged, starving band, marching through a forest, being led by the SS. What would happen hours later seemed impossible to guess. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katharina Jakob thought about her children and the friends and comrades taking care of them, not knowing yet if any of them survived, not knowing that soon she'd see her daughters both alive. Katharina Jakob watched the German soldiers fleeing, streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them, she thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katharina Jakob saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies as never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forest beneath a trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Volke hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker, die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. But don't leave yet, because I'm actually going to do the Internationale, not just tease you with the last little, lines from it in German. This is the Internationale in English. It is Alistair Hewlett's version of it, my rendition of Alistair Hewlett's version of it. And this is a particularly good day to mention the late, great Alistair Hewlett, my dear friend from Glasgow, Scotland, because there's a rent strike going on here and in many other places, and he has a wonderful song, wonderful album called Red Clydeside, which is about the Red Clydeside uprising of 1917 in Glasgow, which involved the rent strike, and the entire album is all about that, and it's a wonderful album. Although you might have to listen to it 100 times before you understand his Glaswegian, but it's also cool because you'll want to listen to it 100 times because the music is so good, and by the time you've heard it the 100th time, then you can understand what he's singing about. That's my theory. And yeah, I'm gonna do this and then see if Ingo has something to say to close off with. I don't know. It seems like a good idea. So I'll give you a little warning there, Ingo. There's your warning. Arise, ye workers, from your slumbers. Arise, ye prisoners of want. For reason in revolt now thunders, and at last ends the age of Kant. Away with all your superstitions, servile masses. Arise, arise. We'll change henceforth the old traditions, spurn the dust to win the prize. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. No more deluded by reaction. On tyrants only we'll make war. The soldiers too will take strike action. They'll break ranks, they'll fight no more. And if these cannibals keep trying to sacrifice us to their pride, they soon shall hear the bullets flying. We'll shoot the generals on our own side. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. No savior from on high delivers, no faith have we in prince or peer. Our own right hand of chains must shiver, chains of hatred, greed, and fear. Ere the thieves will out with their booty and give you all a happier lot. Each at the forge must do their duty and strike when the iron is hot. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. Also, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. The Internationale unites the human race. I should have let it run out longer. That was more. See, the applause would start, and then it wouldn't matter. But
Applause.
Ingo, there we go.
Oh, here we are.
I thought about just bringing you in, like in between songs, and go just to get like like one person applauding. But then I thought that would be kind of silly.
Hello. Yeah, I'm still applauding.
I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you very much.
You're muted.
I'm muted. Okay.
Did you mute yourself? Unmute yourself.
No, I haven't. No.
Or no. Let's see. I don't know why I can't hear anything, but Ingo is muted.
I don't know.
I know it.
My micro is working.
That's weird.
Don't know.
No, that traffic noise is over here, not over there in Germany, right? Yeah. Well, Oh, and then I'm told that people can hear you. Just wait
Yeah.
a sec. I know why. ah,
Hello,
okay.
hello, hello.
I have to put the earphone into the computer rather than in my microphone because you're not in my microphone. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Technical problems on my end.
Can you hear
But
me?
now I can hear you.
Ah,
Everybody else could already hear me, and now I can hear
okay.
you.
So I'm still applauding. So I'm
Okay.
starting again,
It was a
right?
really long one-person applaud.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Okay.
Thank you for the fantastic concert. Vielen Dank für das tolle Konzert. I was watching a video conference too, beneath your screen, because all these Cologne attackers and some others were sitting there and watching the concert, and I was watching to them, and that was really funny.
Oh, that's funny.
So, yeah, so make a little real, real concert atmosphere, whatever.
I love it.
World wondering what I'm talking about. So, well, Krista from Attack Köln would love to hear the song Bicycle. I didn't know that this song would exist at all. Anyway,
Yeah, I
uh,
have a song called the Bicycle Song. There's a video that was just made out of it on YouTube, and I have not practiced that song in about 20 years. So I really
oh,
need to
that's
I need to work on it.
I have a request called "The Lakes of Pontchartrain." You released once on a folk on a cover CD, whatever. You haven't
Mm-hmm.
practiced that at all, I think, as well.
Uh-huh. I have
If
not,
I
but I
can add another request, probably you have you're more keen on is the my great grandparents, but I have no
Oh
access
yeah.
to the chat we use looking at because I have no access to it. So probably other people have requests too. So I don't know what their requests are. But
Yeah, I'm afraid I did. That Christoph did mention the bicycle song on the in the comments. I saw that, and I sort of mentioned like, oh, I don't know that one anymore. And somebody else did request. Actually, I remember Warsaw, which is a song I also have not practiced in like at least 15 years. So, and that's a really complicated one. It's a really interesting chord progression, if I don't say so myself, and I don't remember it at the moment. But my great grandparents, and I could probably pull off my the Lakes of Pontchartrain too. I could,
oh,
yeah. I think I could do both of them. What the heck, you know?
I'm
Uh,
behind the barricades. But that's
and
all for me now.
we got it. Yeah, we got it. Requests coming right up then. Let's see here. Hmm.
We have a separate chat. I have to.
Yeah, you get back to that, and I'll do these songs here.
But there's no in the attack station here now is no songs mentioned. So
Oh yeah.
I'm still waiting. So, also wenn ihr noch Wünsche habt hier, Attack Köln, dann schickt sie mir über den separaten Chat und dann werde ich es diesen Wege weitergeben. God bless the Internet.
Yes.
Whoever God is, I don't know.
Wherever God is. Yeah.
Wherever,
Okay.
wherever.
I'll I won't be able to hear you now. I'll move this mic
Yeah.
back and I'll do those songs.
And mute me, please. And
What's that?
get me off the screen.
I'll get you off the screen. Okay. Thank you so much, Ingo and Attack Cologne, and I'll close out with a few songs and yeah.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank
David.
you. Thank you. And I'm back where I wasn't. I never went away, but let's see. I'm going to move this mic so I can hear myself, which improves everything. Oh, so I managed to disconnect my microphone, and somehow I didn't lose my. These you guys are really patient out there. I don't know. That's crazy. I should have lost half my audience with that one. But can you hear me now? Okay, good. Sorry about that. I unplugged my earphones, plugged them back in, then disconnected my mic. And the nice thing about this platform is that I didn't like disconnect myself by doing that. Which there's other platforms you disconnect your mic and then you disappear from the screen. You know, that good. That didn't happen. Okay, well, let's start this song again with actual sound. It was one fine March morning when I bid New Orleans adieu. I took the road to Jackson Town, my fortunes to renew. I cursed all foreign money, no credit could I gain, which filled my heart with longing for the lakes of Pontchartrain. I stepped on board a railway car beneath the morning sun. I rode the rods till evening, I lay me down again. All strangers there, no friends to me, till the dark girl towards me came. And I fell in love with a Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain. I said, "You pretty Creole girl, my money here's no good. If it weren't for the alligators, I'd sleep out in the wood. You're welcome here, kind stranger, our house is very plain, which fills my heart with longing for the lakes of Pontchartrain." She took me to her mama's house and she treated me there quite well. The hair all about her shoulders and jet black ringlets fell. To try and paint her beauty, I'm sure 'twould be in vain. So handsome was my Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain. Her would she marry me, and she said that never could be, for she had got a lover and he was far at sea. She'd promised she would wait for him, and true she would remain, waiting for her sailor on the lakes of Pontchartrain. So it's fare thee well, my bonny old girl, I never may see you more. But I'll never forget your kindness at the cottage by the shore. And at each social gathering, a flowing glass I'll drain, and I'll drink a health to my Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain. And one of the other songs that Ingo mentioned actually is just so relevant, I have to say, because one of the most endangered populations on the planet today, which is generally the case, and even more the case in the course of this pandemic, is people living in refugee camps in Greece and Africa and the Middle East and all over the world, where there are refugee camps, very much including the Mexican border with the U.S., a refugee camp entirely created by the U.S. And I'm descended, at least for, depending on how you measure it, 3/4 of my family, really more like about, anyway, 7/8 of my ancestry is all refugees. And some of those came from Ireland. And I think it's, when we talk about precedent, I'm on my I do a live stream show, as I've mentioned, every Tuesday through Friday. I interview people for an hour right here on the web. Maybe not on the platform you're watching this on right now, but anyway, on many platforms, such as the Popular Resistance Facebook page. I do a live stream interview show from Tuesday through Friday, and then an open mic on Monday, Pandemic Open Mic Mondays. And just in case any of you, including all of you in Germany, it does not need to be in English. You can do anything in German and English, any other language you want. We would love to have you on the Pandemic Open Mic, and it is every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. GMT, 7 p.m. Central European Time. It's a good time for the Americas, Europe, and Africa, and a terrible time for the Australians and the Japanese. And I'm sorry about that, but you can't please them all. And it's a particularly it's a thing that I think about a lot because the precedent, the history thing. This precedent in terms of the current historical moment. I mean, people talk about the pandemic of 1918. They talk about the Great Depression. And these are both relevant historical references. However, and I need to interview some historians so we can talk about this stuff. But I think the 1840s is a period very few people in the United States know anything about. But Europeans are much more knowledgeable about that period of history. And in the 1840s, there was basically what happened. I mean, I don't want to be lecturing for hours here, but it's, I think, really relevant, important stuff for anybody to pay attention to. What happened in the 1840s? It's very, very similar to what's going on now, except it wasn't a global pandemic. It was a European-wide potato blight, and the impact of the potato blight in the wake of the Columbian Exchange 500 years ago. Europe and many other parts of the world started importing a lot of vegetables and grains and stuff from the Americas. And these grains and vegetables, such as potatoes, transformed European agriculture and increased the output of European farms dramatically. And that's as a result of what they call the Columbian Exchange and improved agricultural practices in Europe. Europe was about 1,000 years behind China in terms of agriculture practices, but they were starting to catch up. And so then what happened in 1846 was there was a potato blight, and the Europe had imported potatoes from South America, but they'd only imported like one variety rather than the thousands that existed. So the one variety of potato they imported, because of the monocropping and problems with biology and whatever stuff that other people understand better than me, there was a failure in the crop throughout Europe. And what this resulted in, as a result of colonial policies in Ireland, in addition to the fact that Ireland ate more potatoes than anywhere else in Europe, which was also part of the colonial legacy, the fact that they ate so many potatoes there. I could explain that, but I won't. But basically, because of that situation, the Irish, from various reasons, did the worst of the Europeans, and half of them died or left at that time, including my relatives, and who were famine refugees. And in the rest of Europe, there was massive, massive problems. And it wasn't a famine in the rest of Europe, but it was hunger, widespread hunger, to the point where basically all of industry closed in 1846. And so that left the European workers unemployed, and there were no states to step in and do the kinds of things that states are doing now to try to prevent upheaval and revolution and starvation. Actually, there were states that could do those things to some extent, and did actually, but not nearly to the extent that they're doing now. And so what happened was uprisings all over the place. After the hunger, after the factories closed, after people were all laid off, after they had no more money to buy food with, they rose up. And that's where you see the images of pitchforks and torches, which became very popular at the time, which is why I have a pitchfork in my discussions with David logo. So then this uprising throughout Europe was largely the result of a potato blight, of a natural sort of of something that was, it's sort of natural in a sense, but it's really a result of civilization and bad practices of it. We're very much like these viruses that are coming around, these increasingly because of climate change and human encroachment in animal kingdoms. And so then here we go, very similar in terms of then the impact, I think also on society. There's a lot of parallels here, and I need to have somebody on my show who's an expert on the 1840s so they can talk about that more than I can. I just know enough about the 1840s to have written a few songs. That doesn't require a whole lot of knowledge. Here's one of them. My great-grandparents were refugees. That should be a normal thing to say. I was born in New York City. My people came from far away. They fled the generals and dictators, the warlords of Moscow and Budapest. You could be conscripted for the rest of your life, or you could head west. My great-great-grandparents were refugees too, just north and west of Brittany. Farmers in the hills somewhere on the starving side of the Irish Sea. They fled their colonial torturers. They fled starvation, slavery. They fled across the Atlantic along with millions of other refugees. My great-grandparents were refugees, but getting to the other side took such a toll, it seems, that my great-grandfather died. So when his son was a little kid, he grew up without a dad. And that's typical of the hard life so many other refugees had. My great-grandparents were refugees. Let me tell you what that means. They were escaping war-torn lands ruled by tyrants, kings, and queens. They did not come seeking fortune. They were not pioneers. Leaving home, their hearts were broken. All their cries fell on deaf ears. My great-grandparents were refugees. No one taught me that in school. It's dangerous information in the old game of divide and rule. My name is David Rovix, and I know who my people are. They're on that raft upon the ocean. They're in the trunk of that car. My great-grandparents were refugees. That should be a normal thing to say. I was born in New York City. My people came from far away. And I'll close with one more song. And thanks so much to Cologne Attack Chapter for sponsoring this concert, and happy May Day to all of you people on general strike and on rent strike. And I hope to see all of you online and in the streets We can have demonstrations like they had in Greece, where they all stood 6 feet apart with red flags in Syntagma Square. And apparently, the risk is more about inside than outside, according to today's statistic from the people studying this stuff in China, who I trust more than anybody doing it here. And I'm gonna that quarantine, davidrovics.com/quarantine is where you can find all the songs I have written about COVID-19, which is currently 11 songs, and a lot of podcasts and the live streams, which you can also watch there, which some people are already doing. That's where I have my Twitch channel embedded. So if people want to watch there in future broadcasts, they can. And I mentioned before the open mic every Monday, open mic, pandemic open mic Mondays. We would love you to sign up, and we will be, especially prioritizing a diversity of voices from different places and different genders and different, diversity generally. I don't need to explain that. New voices, diversity, and ringers. That's the, it'll work out, I think. We've only done one so far, and we'll be doing them every Monday from around 10 a.m. here, 6 p.m. GMT, 7 p.m. Central European Time. And then I do these broadcasts Tuesday through Friday, which you can also watch there if you want. This is the commercial announcement, which I do at the end of all my gigs anywhere, anyway, including in Europe, which is when I usually mention that if people from the U.S. don't make commercial announcements at the end of our gigs, then we lose our passports. It's part of the social contract for U.S. citizens. You have to make xenophobic statements and promote things that you're trying to sell. Here's a song I wrote actually in Bonn. I was in Bonn, Germany in, was it 2000? 2001? 2001. Summer of 2001, I believe, when there was a climate talks in Bonn and Genoa, where somebody is watching from Genoa, actually. In Genoa, there was a massive police riot, and to go along with the G8 protests. So I will just leave you with this one more request, and apologies to all the other people who made requests for songs that I don't remember. I'll try to practice them. Cough, cough. Yeah, it's a good time to stop. I'm coughing too much. Okay, but one more song for everybody. A closing song for the barricades, which will be here momentarily as soon as they start evicting people. When the world has gone crazy, and it's all becoming clear, when they're gunning down our comrades, and it seems the end is near, as they're loading up the launchers for the tear gas grenades, we can take off our bandanas and kiss behind the barricades. When it's madness all around, you can see this at a glance. We will sing and we will cry, we will laugh and we will dance, as they shout their marching orders beneath the helicopter blades. We shall seize the moment for a kiss behind the barricades. They will try to break our spirit, and at times they may succeed, but our love for the world is stronger than their greed. When the building is surrounded and hope begins to fade, in my final hour, a kiss behind the barricades. As the movement grows, there will be hills and bends, but at the center of the struggle are your lovers and your friends. And the more we hold each other up, the less we can be swayed. Here's to love and solidarity, and a kiss behind the barricades. Don't pay the rent. Talk to you soon.